Powerful and provocative, prophetic and practical,
Have you ever found yourself?
Are you dating for that person?
informative and
I feel
inspirational.
every bit of that. Like, I'm not trying to waste my
How you gonna do better if you don't know what better looks like? I do. Come on, let's talk about it with me, the mind massager.
Intellectual stew. Oh, we're cooking something true. Intellectual stew. Real raw and relevant for you. With James Kirkland guiding through the deep, the light, the old, the new. Intellectual stew. Yeah, we're stirring up the view.
All right, what's up? What it do? Time for another episode of the Intellectual Stew with yours truly, James Kirkland. James Kirkland, I'm your host. And tonight we are diving into a conversation that I believe is long overdue. Tonight's topic is called Who Taught Us to Suffer in Silence? Who taught us to suffer in silence? As you come in tonight, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I want you to, first of all, let me know where you're listening from. Let me know where you're listening from. And number two, I want you to share this conversation because this is a conversation that is long overdue. If you have ever felt the pressure to be strong, even when you were hurting, do me a favor right quick. Drop a strong arm emoji in the comments. Drop a strong arm emoji in the comments. If you've ever been strong, when the truth of the matter is the weight of the world was on your shoulders, you were hurting, but you felt like regardless of whatever was going on, you just had to be strong, that quitting was not an option, that you couldn't take a break. Drop a strong arm in the community, in the chat. I would do it, but I'm not on my, drop a strong arm in the chat. Drop a strong arm in the chat. Do that for me right quick. Do that right quick. And I see I got people listening on YouTube. All right, there we go. His divine appointment said, yeah, they've had to be strong even though they were hurting. And there's some other people. And men, I want listen. Let me let you know something. We're in a safe space tonight, right? Nobody's judging you in here tonight. This is safe space. You have the right to be vulnerable tonight. You have the right to share emotions tonight. It's okay because we're going to debunk some myths tonight. Because the truth of the matter, who was it that told us that pain should be hidden? Who taught us that tears were weakness? Who taught us that as a man, we should keep everything bottled up until something inside of us breaks? Because if we're honest tonight, many of us have been taught just that, particularly in the African-American community. Men have often been conditioned to believe that strength means silence, that resilience means repression, that emotional expression somehow diminishes our masculinity. But the truth is, silence has been costing us. It's costed some of us our relationships. It's costed some of us our families. And many times, you know what? It's costing us in our bodies. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that many people don't realize, Pastor Jones, Elder Wiggins. Tonight, we're going to talk about how mental stress does not just stay in the mind, but mental stress, it travels throughout the body. And it shows up in places that many of us never expected. It can show up in the form of high blood pressure. It can show up as heart disease. It can show up as chronic pain. And sometimes it shows up in ways that make you stop your whole life and ask a question. Wait a minute, what's going on? What is my body trying to tell me? And that's part of the reason we're having this conversation tonight, because science has shown us something that many of our grandmamas knew. They knew this a long time ago. When stress builds up inside of us, the body reacts. Listen, let me tell you like this. Deep inside of the brain, there's something called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the body's alarm. It's the brain's alarm system. It is designed, its job is to detect danger. And when it thinks something is threatening you, it sends a signal throughout the body that tells your body, prepare to survive. And when that happens, what happens next is your body begins to release cortisol. And what cortisol does is it starts to increase or elevate the heart rate. It releases this hormone that causes stress. Its job is to heighten alertness. In other words, it prepares you for fight or flight. But here's the problem with that. It can't tell the difference between a tiger in the jungle, the tiger in the jungle, or if you're dealing with emotional trauma. And so when the body does not understand that, it begins to work against you. And I'm not speaking tonight theoretically. I'm speaking personally, because a couple of weeks ago I was supposed to do this show. And I want to apologize for not being able to do it, because I've had my guest on hold for 2 weeks, and I'll bring them in just a minute. But a couple of weeks ago, I woke up with severe sciatic nerve pain. Went to the emergency room. First I went to the urgent care. Then I went to the emergency room, and I found myself literally saying, what in the world is going on in my body? Now, if you've never experienced sciatica before, let me tell you something. That pain is no joke, because it starts in the lower back, shoots down through your leg, gets in your ankle, and sometimes it feels like your body is literally rebelling against you. And I found myself asking these questions. I kept saying, what in the world is going on? Because the doctors can explain the medical side of it, but sometimes life has a way of teaching you a deeper lesson. And I've come to believe that sometimes what God does is he allows us to experience certain things in our body, so that as we understand them, as we understand those lessons, we're able to teach those same lessons. And I began to think about something. What if that sciatic flare-up was my body telling me something about stress? What if my nervous system had been holding on to more than I realized? What if the tension of responsibility and leadership expectations and life had quietly pushed my body into that fight or flight mode that we were just talking about? And suddenly I realized this conversation about mental health wasn't just theoretical anymore. It's now personal. So which is why tonight's conversation is going to be powerful, because we're not just talking about emotions. We're talking about survival. We're talking about how generations of men have been taught to carry things alone. And we're talking about how silence has been mistaken for strength. And we're talking about how breaking that silence might actually be the beginning of healing. And tonight I'm honored to have special guests joining us in the conversation. I have Pastor Ray Evans of the Southside Missionary Baptist Church in Columbus, Mississippi, and Brother David Dwyer. And together we're going to unpack some of these myths that men have carried for years. We're going to talk about why men struggle with emotional pain. We're going to talk about how we struggle with cultural expectations and how they shape our mental health, and why vulnerability is not a weakness, and how unresolved stress can impact not only our minds, but our physical health. Because the reality is this, and I'm going to bring them in: the mind and the body are not separate systems. They are deeply connected. And when the mind is overwhelmed, the body often cries out. And if we keep ignoring the signals long enough, eventually the body will force us to pay attention. So tonight we're asking the question: who taught us to suffer in silence? And more importantly, how do we unlearn that lesson? So how do we create a new generation of men who understand that emotional awareness is not weakness, but wisdom. That vulnerability is not fragility, but courage. And the healing begins the moment we decide that silence is no longer the answer. Stay with us tonight. If you have not shared this, go ahead and share it, because the conversation might challenge some old beliefs, but it might also help somebody realize something very important. You don't have to carry everything yourself. So tonight, I am honored to have with us, first of all, my friend and my brother, Pastor Ray Evans. Dr. Evans, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm glad to have you in the building tonight. He's going to bring the pastoral perspective, the faith leadership, and emotional health and ministry. He is also a counselor. Well, he's over counselors in the state of Mississippi. He's over about 100 and some counselors. So he is trained in this area. So I wanted to get his perspective, and every time he comes on, he always blesses us. So I have him in, and let me go ahead. Well, I'm gonna ask you one question first before I bring Brother Dwyer in. Okay, let's start here. Pastor Evans, in many Black communities, men were raised to believe showing emotion meant weakness. From a pastoral and a spiritual perspective, where do you think that belief came from?
I think it came from a space and time where it was just not considered manly to express any emotions. But it wasn't just the negative emotions or emotions that have a negative connotation. I have a friend who said that he had 4 daughters and they were up in age before he could tell them, "I love you."
Wow.
Thought that was not a manly thing. The same brother told me when his daughters were born, he was never there. You know, her mother, and he was at home, he would get the call, "You have a healthy baby child," you know. So I think part of it was just a misguidance in society that did not allow men to emote or to be in touch with their feelings. And maybe it came along when the roles were more defined. This is the role of a man. This is the role of a woman. We got that confusion from somewhere, and it had to come from us. It didn't come from God.
Okay. And let me put that before y'all in the chat, because y'all are awfully quiet, except my people on YouTube. They're over here talking real good, but my Facebook people aren't saying anything. I really want y'all to participate in the conversation as well. Where do you think that myth came from? The same question I just asked Pastor Evans. I want to make that question for the chat. From why do you think men were raised to believe showing emotion was weakness, and especially brothers that are in the chat and sisters? Some of y'all have had to assume the role of raising young boys on your own, and some of you might have said to them, you know, boys don't cry, or boys shouldn't cry. Where do you think that myth came from? Where do you think that myth came? And you know what? Let's get Dwyer on in here, and because Dwyer been here 20 minutes before to do sound check, so I appreciate him. Let me get him in here. And then we're gonna go ahead and get this conversation going even more. So let's get him in here. I want this layout right here. That's the one I want. See if I can make it work. Let's see if I can make it work. It's close enough. No, it ain't. Is that it? Y'all, I'm trying new stuff tonight. So if it don't work, charge me to my head, not to my heart. Whatever. I like the other layout better. We're gonna take this off. We're gonna take this off. Hold on, let me put y'all back where I had y'all a minute ago. Where we at? All right, there we go. I like that better. All right, so Brother Dwyer, did you just hear the question I just asked Pastor Evans? The question was, and I'm going to ask you from your perspective, where do you think the idea came from that if men started believing that showing emotion meant weakness?
If I'm being transparent, I'm sorry. You know, good evening, fine gentlemen. How y'all doing today?
Great.
Good. I think, to honestly answer this question, I have to say from a place of ignorance. You can't teach what you don't know. And so when you look at parents, grandparents, so forth and so on, they literally taught what they knew, and what they knew wasn't centered around emotional intelligence. It wasn't centered around spiritual intelligence. It wasn't centered around how to create a family to where you have the ability to have open communication teaching both the boy child and the girl child the ability to communicate effectively, but doing so in a very tactful and respectful manner. And so, ideally, when you look at it, a lot of men end up emulating what they see. If they seen a father in the home, then they pretty much, in some degree, try to mimic what they've seen to a certain degree, whether it
Mhm.
worked or whether it didn't work. If it didn't work, they tried to do the things that worked, that they felt worked, because at the end of the day, they seen what daddy was doing did not work with mama. But if it did work, then that became their blueprint to success. And then from that point forward, they tried to figure it out. So again, I go back to parents, because I think parenting ultimately is one of the biggest things that create a lot of this dysfunction, I believe, when you start looking at modern day families.
And you know, man, and that's a good point. And I think people really, really underestimate the power. I'm gonna say the power and the value of parenting. And for most of us, parenting is on the job training, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, we had the benefit of mama and daddy. You know what I'm saying? But Doc, it's some things I might not have liked about how mom and daddy raised me. You know, certain things, I might not like the fact that I had to sit at the dinner at the table. I had to eat onions in my eggs or something. You know, I might not have liked. So if I raise my children, I'm gonna raise mine to be a little different from that, right? And if I raise them to be different than that, then I'm experimenting. And so it becomes on the job training. And so sometimes, and I heard this, Pastor Evans, you can tell me if you agree with this or not. I've heard that it's been said that sometimes a bad parent is a child's first enemy.
Wow. It is probably the first person they learn to have negative feelings toward and not know what to do with those feelings.
Oh yeah.
So I've worked with a lot of young teens, and there's males who were angry and they didn't know why they were angry. It wasn't something that happened outside of the home. It happened in the home, but they didn't know how to verbalize it.
Man, that's crazy. Man, I'm gonna tell you, man. My pops told me once. My dad used to substitute teach for years in the North Little Rock School District. And one day there's a little boy that was really belligerent. He was really belligerent. You know, he was really belligerent. And so my dad went to talk to him. And when he went to talk to the young man, what he discovered after having a conversation with him is the mama told him right before he came to school, she wished he had never been born. That's his mama saying this to him, right? And so as a 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old, how do you handle those emotions? I used to, I probably sucked at parenting for a little while. I started learning from my ways. At one point, I used to see my daughter in the morning when I'm rushing her. She didn't respond well, and she was crying. And I thought about, I said, why would I put her on the bus crying? So I corrected that quick. Brother Dwight, if your mama told you on your way to school that she wishes she never had you, how do you handle that?
Let's be honest. And I want to make this real, because I don't think it's a large population that experienced that, but I do want to come back to that as well. But for the most part, what I do believe is more reality to a lot is that when parents, whether mama or daddy, they did not, experience a joyful time in their relationship with the other parent. And so they themselves have emotions that they have bottled up. And unfortunately, it comes out. And that emotion, when it comes out in proximity of that child, they become the recipient of that emotion that parent is given. So they may not have said that parent, that they don't wish, they wish that child wasn't born, but they may say something that makes that child feel bad about their father. They may say something that you look just like your father. You remind me of now I'm speaking this from experience.
Wow.
You remind me of him. I can't say the things that we actually said back then. Not on here. I might get you counseling if I say it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's real. Now let's go to the extreme of what you said, right? Because you got to look at the relationship dynamics between a boy and his mother. That is literally the introduction to the first person of the opposite sex. That's the person that he believes is supposed to love him, regardless of anything. If I get into any trouble, I can always call my mama. She's gonna always receive me regardless of anything. But when you say that, now you have robbed me of that opportunity. You have taken that away from me, because at the end of the day, I can't depend on you in that regard. And let's look at it from this dynamics. Let's just say all three of us are high school friends. You got that in your mother. You know, my brother here in the middle, he probably got both mama and daddy in the house. I just got mom in the house. And my mama told me that I remind her of my daddy. And she don't even like my daddy.
She don't
So
even
what
like
does that say about me?
Mhm.
So now not only am I dealing with those emotions, but I'm also dealing with the emotions that I'm hiding while I'm around y'all, because to some degree, I'm somewhat jealous and envious for what you guys got that I don't have.
Wow. That's and y'all listen. If you've not liked or loved or hearted this show yet, please do it and then share it. This conversation is going to go deep tonight, and this is where we're going with the intellectual stew. We call it the intellectual stew for a reason. And I'm sorry if I don't talk about some of the trendy topics. I'm talking about things that I really are going to help our community, help us heal. And I bring people on who have been through things. I've been through things. You know, I got testimonies I can't tell, that I won't tell. You know, but their experience and those experiences have shaped me to be who I am. And I love the fact of who I might, you know, what the old folks say, I might not be all that I should be. But I thank God I'm not all that I used, because I'm on this journey. I'm on this path to better. So let's talk about this, because Pastor Evans, you deal with it. But let's look at Chauncey Kelsey's comment here. Chauncey said, I grew up the only child in a single parent household with my mom. And this is when, and I want you to address this, Ray. He said, I didn't feel like I had an outlet to talk about things. Talk from the perspective of the young boy being raised by his mother, but doesn't feel like he has an outlet.
Well, sometimes children become the sounding board to mom's struggles. And everything that mom is experiencing, you almost pull into adulthood a child, because the information that you're sharing, the feelings that you are expressing, they can't process them. But now they have an effect on the child. Sometimes they mirror the child. There are many young men who cannot stand the sight of their father when they never had a relationship with him. They just went based upon what the mother said.
Wow.
And so that time is critical. That period in which the mind is still developing, and yet they're getting inundated with just one message that is not a positive message. And it also has a message that's reflected in their lives. So if my daddy was no good and I look like my dad, I act like my dad, then what does that say about me in my mother's eyes?
That's deep. So let's now you didn't open up a kind of different kind of can of worms. Now I got to go a whole different direction with this, because in those moments, and Dwyer, you kind of hit on this a moment ago, you know, as a teenager, as a developing young man, what we end up doing is we end up at times, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Ray, we end up writing unwritten rules. And these aren't boundaries yet. These are rules. Rules are things that we live by. Boundaries are things we learn to execute as we get older. You know, I'm not going to let you cross to this boundary. But sometimes we write rules. When I was younger, I used to beg for a spanking.
Wow.
I begged for a spanking because my punishment, if I got a bad grade, was 9 weeks in the room. That's solitary confinement. You know what I'm saying? And my mom, she didn't mean any harm. You know, she was saying, get your grades up. You know, that's my parents did. They were like, get your grades up. That's what you're supposed to do. But did it take 9 weeks? And then what happened in those 9 weeks is I started developing these unwritten rules. Like, does anybody listen to me? Do I have a voice? If every time I do something as small as get a C, am I going to get sent to my room, and when can I come out? All these rules start to become unwritten rules. And whether we know it or not, we start to establish ourselves, how we live according to those written rules. So as a child, and I'm raised in a house where I don't have a voice, I'm being told, you know, like Chauncey just said a minute ago, I don't have anyone to talk to in my house. What rules am I establishing, Dr. Dwyer?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, because I can relate to that, brother. I think at some point you just look for some type of rules to create to where you start to, I don't know, feel good about yourself, if you will. And again, you just try to find a way to maneuver within that confined space that was created for you, because you're not being created, you're not being given the latitude, right, to do this, and you're not given the latitude to take these risks and things of that nature. And so within that confined space that has been constructed for you, you try to find some degree of comfort. And then you get older. Now it gets you to the point to where those comforting skills that you created for yourself, now those comforting skills now become the rule that you live and govern your life by. Now, going back to, because I like where my brother went a few seconds ago, the formative years, the early formative years, the stages of child development, if you will. When you start looking at those stages of child development now create the blueprint of what that young adult male now believes becomes the blueprint and structure of his life. So in essence, now within the space that he has created for himself, he is trying to find companionship, if you will. Because again, they don't know, we didn't know any better at a young age. So you're trying to find companionship in all actuality. And unfortunately, you end up, unbeknownst to you, you end up sabotaging those relationships, because let's just be honest, she wasn't raised like I was raised. So now we get into those issues, those problematic concepts that we create for ourselves. And then what ends up coming out is anger, frustration, lashing out, so forth and so on, because you were never given the proper tools as a young man to learn how to maneuver this space that we call life.
That's
And
good.
because you were never given those tools, now you feel like the only response you got is the exact same thing you seen growing up. The emotional irregulation, the lashing out, the verbal abuse, and all those other great things. And then you go on and you end up doing that to somebody else.
Follow it up, Ray Evans. Go ahead. Follow up what he just said, please.
Again, we establish these rules based upon what we are taught, what is said to us, what we see. And there's no guarantee that they will be productive in our lives or helpful. Sometimes these rules are very unique, very strange, because they're just limited to our small world. And a lot of that is seen when we enter relationships and we have these unique rules that really other people can't relate to. So it complicates our lives, even in adulthood, because that's what we have. That's what we are. You know, when you talk about the grades, we know what leads to good things happening, what things lead to bad things happening, and that's not the case in everyone's life. So it can be very confusing to a young man, but it could set up tendencies that you go back to even in adulthood.
Yeah, that's really good, and that's what I want us to understand. Hold on, I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I'm trying to do too much over here. All right, there we go. We back to where we were. I'm trying to upload another overlay. I'm multitasking. Y'all got to forgive me. But no, you are 100% right. And I get it. I get it because, and I didn't understand it until, I wrote that book last year called Stuck on the Couch, but it didn't become real because Dwyer, when I got off the couch, I ended up going in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't make any sense to get out of one situation and then go into another situation. But that's what we do sometimes. Dwyer, from the practical side of life, let me ask you a question. How does emotional silence affect men day to day?
I appreciate and I'm gonna go a little far left if you don't mind. I appreciate the topic of emotional silence, but I like to call it more so along the lines of emotional constipation.
It is.
And why do I call it that? Because you get built up. You are taught at a very young age, little boys don't cry. You're taught at a very young age to get up, wipe it off, and get back in the game. Don't worry about it. You're taught at a very young age when you have a failed relationship that, you can't really talk about it. You don't necessarily have, like you just heard previously, you don't have the outlet to talk about it. You didn't have your dad there to talk about how he processed it when he was young. So now it gets to the point where you get older and it's like, you can't express it. You don't feel you have the space to express it. You really don't feel like people care, if I'm just being completely transparent. And so it has nothing to do with whether or not somebody else actually said that. It's really what you believe. And then if you're not literally fulfilling your utilitarian value in the environment, in your household, it's like, what's your purpose? You know, we've heard it before. What do men do? Well, you describe men. Men provide and protect. That's it. That's all I'm good for is provision and protection. So it's like now, as long as I'm doing that, everything is fine. So that being said, do I have the space to talk about I had a bad day at work? Do you really care whether or not I had a bad day at work, or at the end of the day, I'm having some issues or concerns with our oldest child, you know, him being a man and things of that nature, who, by the way, is an adult child. I'll just say it that way, right? As my adult child, him being a man, I'm struggling in that space to try to transition from fatherhood to more of an advisor in his life because it's different. So when you look at it, that emotional constipation becomes a buildup. And what ends up happening when that buildup continues to prolong, it comes out like a volcano. And when it comes out, now what I'm teaching you, ideally, is that you don't want me to express myself because you think every time I express myself, it becomes an explosion. To where the reality of it is that I was taught to keep it all in. And then at the end of the day, when I can't keep it all in, this is what it looks like. So I mean, I don't want to keep going on and on and on because I can as it pertains to this, but I think it's really problematic when we live in a world where the world itself, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but where the world itself doesn't want to hear the voice of the man, they just want the utilitarian value of the man.
Utilitarian value of the. Go ahead, Evans. I saw you. He was about to explode. Go ahead, Evans.
I think that is a wide-ranging problem because when any man starts talking about his feelings, that's when his manhood is called into question. When we continue in silence, then we're this person that no one knows. So you have both ways. But I wrote this down: to confront through dialogue. So many times, it takes a level of emotional courage to talk about those things that burden us the most. You know, and if we have never had that luxury of expressing ourselves in that manner, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And it does not happen overnight. And it does not happen with a partner who questions your strength when you give her vulnerability. You know, it has to be a safe place.
That's good. And listen, y'all in the chat, please do me a favor. If you've not, you can't see his divine appointment. Are we all on this? Can y'all see us? Can y'all hear us? Listen, it's that's good. Y'all said it. Everybody in the chat though, do me a favor. Like this, share, please, heart this comment. Make this a show. We still got a little ways to go, and I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm on both, on the regular side, you and see all of them. Okay. I had a friend of mine tell me today that a couple of weeks ago he had to go to the emergency room, and when he went to the emergency room, his blood pressure was like at 195. Oh, okay, I got you. Oh, y'all can't see us all on the mobile side. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know how to fix that. Okay, I do see what you're talking about over here on the mobile side. That's what that is. How I do that? How I fix that? You just taught me something. Hold on, let me try something. Oh, shucky ducky, quack quack. You can't see us like that either, can you? Now you can see it. No, you can't see us all right there either. I don't know how to fix it. I'm going to have to work on that one for next week, y'all. I apologize. Is that better? Yeah, she got me all mixed up now. I'm going to hide this because y'all got me nervous over here now. They got me nervous, Evans. They got me nervous. I like the 3 I had at first, but I don't know. I see what she's saying now. But anyway, what was I? Oh, yeah, I had a friend of mine. He went to the hospital last week. 195 blood pressure, 195 over 100 and something. And they got his blood pressure back down. And when he went home, you know, he was talking to his wife and saying, you know, hey, some of the stressors that I'm experiencing are in the house, you know, And first of all, I kind of got on him for telling me his business, because I don't really like, you know, people telling me, you know, you got a problem in your house, you know, you work that out at home. Don't really come telling everybody your business. But he knows I'm a safe space. So anyway, he told me what he told me. And he said she started arguing with him and started saying that, no, that wasn't the case. ladies, let me ask you a question. Is that a good time to argue? He just got home from the hospital. Blood pressure 195 over 100 and something. And you want to say, if he's telling you, if you ask me the issue and I tell you what the issue is, then don't tell me that that's not the issue. Does that make sense? Anyway, let's go on. We talk about this. Go ahead, Evans. You agree to say something. I can see it in your facial expression.
It makes all the sense in the world, but having the control to actually deny self and allow someone else the safety of being able to express themselves. Sometimes that's a struggle. To give is sometimes a struggle because most times we think about ourselves. So if I turn that around and I have been probably where the wife has been, and the first time I hear something negative, I don't think about what they've expressed. I think about how it makes me feel. And I just think that is something that we have to mature through. Or two, because that's just a natural reaction. Instead of being in the moment with someone, being supportive of them.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. Let's get back on this emotional silence piece of being, as my friend has called it, emotional constipation, because we do retreat. And I didn't realize I did it for years. For years, I probably was a ambivert. More. I don't think I was ever an extrovert, but I think I might have been an ambivert, somewhere in the middle. But over the past several years, especially after my divorce and the pandemic and everything that went on, I was alone so much. I went so long without talking that at a certain point, I didn't even want to talk at all. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And people were thinking I was arrogant and people think I was mean. I just was I didn't want to talk. I had nothing to say. And in part of that time, because of everything that I had lost, Dwyer, between the family and everything, I was so embarrassed. I was so depressed. I didn't want to be seen until I presented a better version of myself. So if I was quiet, maybe you didn't see me. Maybe if I was quiet, I could get in, get out, and get back to my couch before y'all caught it, right? Because truth be told, because if I talk, guess what? Now I've told. Oh, God. If I talk, now I've told it, because now I've shared it, and now I'm responsible for saying it. You understand what I'm saying? Because when you put those declarations, you put those pieces out there, now you got to live up to what you said. And if I don't say anything, I ain't got to live up to it. I'm good. And I probably lived beneath my expectations for a long time because I stopped talking. And I'm looking at myself as I'm thinking I'm hurting somebody else, but truth of the matter is I'm really hurting myself. And Evans, because you've been my unofficial counselor for the last 5 or 6, 7, 8 years, because when I have a problem, I call Mississippi, I call Evans, and he never not talks to me, but he talks me through it. Now explain that that process that I was going through where I didn't want to talk, Dr. Evans.
I think it's a very common place to be when you really? Want to be just ignored for a while until things come back to a better place for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I can speak from experience. Married for 30 years, did not talk in my marriage because it usually led to a greater issue or an argument. So if I could process stuff within my mind and make sense of it, I just didn't. Well, the only thing about that, it kept me right where I was and never allowed me to grow as a man. And I accept responsibility, for that. Now, the one thing I know I have to do is be expressive of what I feel, what I think. And as I said before, it's a level of emotional courage to put it out there.
Wow.
But now I'm willing to do it because the loss was so great until I don't want to experience that again.
I got to bring the ladies in on that conversation right there. And ladies, I want y'all to hear what he just said. And I want y'all to talk in the chat if you would. Like I said, they talking good over here on they're talking real good over here on on YouTube. They are. I wish I could put all the comments together. But Evans just said he was married 30 years And he said a lot of times he didn't talk in his marriage. And what I heard in that, sometimes we don't talk, and I could relate to that. But I ain't had that much problem in my relationship. I ain't gonna lie. I can't say that was my testimony, but I've heard people with that testimony. He's saying he didn't talk to keep the peace. Because sometimes when we do talk, it leads to confusion. Ladies, how do you feel? How do you feel hearing that? I really would prefer, especially those in relationships, those who have been married, not somebody who's just from the ideology of the idea of being. I'm talking about a really good, healthy, realistic, non-delusional marriage, not the ideology this figment of that we put out here, of these ideologies that we have out here. I'm talking about a real, if you're not Christian, that's fine, but I'm a moral. How about that? A moral marriage, where there's mutuality, there's love, there's responsibility. And then you hear your husband say that he doesn't talk on purpose. And the reason why he's talking is because he doesn't talk is because he wants to keep the peace. Now he pays the bills. He shows up for the children. He sleeps beside you every night. Y'all show up at functions together. Y'all do all of these things, and he loves you. But he don't know how to love you, because if he loves you the way he's been loving you and he talks, then in that moment, he has to be prepared for the backlash. You want to follow up on that, Ray?
I'm just writing down the skills of Delilah, but not the spirit. Remember what Samson said. He was able to lay his head on her lap.
Hold on. Dwyer, you ain't never experienced one of these, but my boy, Evans about to get one right now. You ready, Evans? Hold on, here you go. No, when you say a line like that, you got to close, Doc. I'm sorry, it's time to tune up. I got to hear your voice change. He said the skills of Delilah, but not the spirit of Delilah.
Yes.
Say that for the unchurched, those that don't know the story of Delilah. Break that down for us, sir.
Samson found a place where he could rest. He found a place where he could forget about everything else. And the difference, the issue was not her skill level. The difference was her spirit, because she did not care enough to protect him. But she wanted the silver. She wanted what could enhance her life. She had the skills to enhance his life.
Yeah. And
in return, her life be enhanced. So for a person, and I can share this with you, not wanting to come home is not a good feeling.
No, it ain't.
But sometimes that's what I felt in the past, because I knew that we had to deal with something, and always it wasn't going to be a productive conversation.
That's sad. Crystal and Crystal, we understand women go through a lot of the same things. We always try to act like we try to figure out who's the most traumatized. And I don't understand why we have that comparison. I think we're all traumatized. We just need to work on bonding instead of battling, because we all go through it. But this show so happens to be about men's mental health. But like I told you all in the advertisements, ladies, come in, eavesdrop. If you can pick something up from it, please, ma'am, by all means, pick up, and you are welcome to be a part of. You see him too, don't you? Come on, Dr. Dwyer. He's sitting there smiling. He ready to talk. I can see him. He's in the starting block like he about to run a 6'3", 60-yard dash. Come on, Doc. Go ahead and say something about what we just talked about.
Hey, man, I'm just being patient. I like to listen. I love that comparison, that analogy, if you will. I think all in all, and I kind of started talking about this earlier, I think all in all, we have the equipment for relationships. We're just not equipped for the relationship. So we lead with the equipment, and we don't necessarily get the equipping. That is always the problem. I don't care where you go, in whatever capacity it is, even if you look at what you're called to do.
Oh, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you was changing your voice. I was gonna give it to you. Okay, the equipping and not versus the equipment. Say that again, please. Please say that some more.
We have the equipment, but we're not equipped for it. And it's just like when you look at what you're called to do. Sure, you may have the awareness, but there's still a process that you go through before you actually step into that equipping, that actual calling that you're called to do. There is a process to get there. You have to be equipped. And so even we look at our younger years, and a lot of us, we kind of rushed it, if you will. Let's just be honest. Let's be completely honest. We kind of rushed it a little bit. We got married a little early, right? And because we got married early, we weren't equipped, men and women both. We weren't equipped for the mantle of marriage in which we kind of adorn. Because at the end of the day, if we don't necessarily understand the true purpose of what marriage is all about, then how can we actually display that to the world? So now we actually get into these marriages, and it's all about what what is it? The gospel of Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? That has nothing to do with it. And so that's what you do. You go back and forth, And like, everybody's mentioned, you're sitting in your own home, intimidated and quiet, because at the end of the day, and I just speak from a man's perspective, at the end of the day, you've all heard it: happy wife, happy life. So now I spend a large portion of my time trying to figure out how to make her happy. But under that assumption, does that mean that my happiness is null and void? Because that's the space that we move in. So it's all about the Valentine's Day. It's all about the anniversary, her birthday, and all these other holidays. That's not holy days, right? And we actually do these things because if I don't do it, there's going to be some emotional backlash. And I don't want to deal with the emotional backlash. So I get, in some degree manipulated into doing the thing. It's not a direct manipulation, it's an indirect manipulation. So now all of these things become just stockpiled, one on top of one another. And then eventually what ends up happening is that you're left with a silent, dormant man with the equipment, never going through the equipping. Therefore, he never got an opportunity to step into the full calling. Not saying it's her fault. It's his fault for getting into it too early, right? Let's own it. That's what we got to do. We got to own it. If I got into it too early, it's my fault. I'm the one to say, will you? She said, I will. So the person who initiated, we got to own that part. And my responsibility should have been to take the time to get the lesson, to get the understanding, to go through the equipping, so that now when I say, will you, she say, I do. I know exactly who I'm called to be for her.
Man, you just said something, and something quickened inside of me when you said that. People, Evans and Dwyer, people always ask me, where I made my mistake in my marriage. And I'm still talking about 7 years later. So of course I'm affected by it, right? It happened, 20 years you did it. But they asked me what my one, and I wrote about this in the book. And that's one of the things I said. They said, what would you do different if you, how would you advise others? And I said, what I would do is I would tell them to make sure they manage the growth. Because see, growth is inevitable, right? You're going to grow up, you grow apart, you grow in different directions. Growth is going to happen whether you have, that's why they take roses and plant roses in a box, because they grow so wild, right? And if you don't manage the growth in your marriage, then you will end up growing apart, because you'll look up and you hadn't talked in 5 or 10 years. You'll look up and your anniversary is just mundane and redundant, right? And because you didn't manage that growth, then things started growing wild and growing apart. And I think that's what happens. And I'm equating that to what you just said a minute ago, Dwyer, because you said I stopped talking, and I'm not saying it's her fault, because at a certain point, if I'm man enough, I should have said, I'm going to talk in my own house. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to have to figure out how to communicate. And at 53 now, and sometimes I think about dating now, and now I'm like, nah, but sometimes I think about it, but I think about the work, and I'd be doggone if I'm going to be with somebody that I don't want to talk to.
Yes.
I'd be doggone if I'm going to be with somebody that I feel like I got to hide something from. You know what I'm saying? If I can't be naked If I can't be honest, go ahead, Dwight.
Can I do just a little micro adjustment there? I'm not
Well, you
saying managing the growth is not accurate, because being a man,
Mhm.
I don't think we talk about it a lot. Being a man is a large undertaking. And in this world, the world waters manhood now. And I've been saying this, man, I don't know, for at least 5 years. I think there is a very indirect attack on the father, and it's going through fathers.
Mhm.
We pay
Yes.
attention to it, right? When I create the environment for growth, it ain't about managing it yet. I have to create the environment
Oh,
so
no
that
doubt,
growth
no
happens,
doubt, no doubt,
right?
no doubt, no
Because
doubt.
those same roses that you talked about, if they ain't in the proper environment, they will not grow the way that
They
they're
will not grow.
supposed to grow. So now I don't want us to grow by evolution. I want us to grow by intentionality. I want us to,
Intentionality.
right. I want us to grow according to his word. And if that becomes the primary focus of our relationship, what his word says, now ideally the word moves us into the position to where we are inevitably, we don't have a choice but to grow, we collectively. Now the idea is that we grow together, because if we don't grow together, now we're going to end up growing apart. So that comes back to me, right? Because there's a huge responsibility in that, right?
Mhm.
And there's a direct comparison in the Bible that talks about, husbands as in Christ. So if we don't necessarily get that, and again, talking about me, I can't talk about nobody else. At the young age of 21, I didn't get that. I didn't know that. Why? Because it wasn't talked about in the household. I got the law in the household. I got the 10 commandments, but that's where it began and that's where it ends. Then after that, what did I get? Church, right? So I got the 10 commandments and I got church. And what did we get in the church? I'm raised Presbyterian. So we went to church and we was out by the time the ball game came home. So I knew I'd be home by the time look, man, I'm just being honest. Y'all don't I knew we'd be home by the time kickoff happened, right? But again, there was no equipping in the church. See, that's, to me, I think that's a golden opportunity, because my father was absent, but we're the deacons, we're the elders, you know what I'm saying? That was a great opportunity to take a young man under your wings and talk to him, develop him, and mentor him into manhood.
Where were you raised? What city were you raised in?
South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Small town?
Yeah, Sumter, right outside of Columbia.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Follow up on that, Evans.
Look, I almost raised my hand. The idea of young couples not having mentors or other support is a travesty for our community, because I don't think, when you talk about a perfect age for marriage, then what is that? I got married at 21 also. And if I would have waited until I was 31, there still would have been some missing elements. If I would have got married at 41, there still would have been some missing elements. The key is teaching couples that when there is not, you don't have to say we're going to part ways for everything. Just having that put on the table, that certain things you have to work through and be willing to work through, especially if you're both willing to make the necessary changes. Now, if one person is not willing, then that kind of kills the ability to couple. But if both are determined, my youngest child is now 22 and doesn't look like marriage is going to be in sight. My oldest is 29. Then I have a 24-year-old. I tell them to grow and develop you. And then everything else will fall in line. Continue to have a relationship with the Lord. And also it enhanced my preaching and pastoring, because these things are now discussed from the pulpit in a very open, straightforward way.
Okay.
And my motivation is, I don't know how much time I have, so I can't play around with it.
Gotcha.
So I have to equip when I can, as much as I can. That when I come to the house, then I can say I have done the Lord's will, and it's not for show, it's not for fashion. It's to enhance the lives of people as we apply the word of the Lord. Finding the greater you. If it's not done right, you can lose yourself. And I think a lot of times that happens when you hope to grow together and both improve. If you have to acquiesce, if you have to compromise really your core beliefs, then you can end up losing yourself. And I always think that's a dangerous thing. And there's some who never think my core values, I should never compromise those. There should not be any give when it comes to certain things. And I tell people deal with that lightly, because when you compromise, that's all you, because that was the choice you made. So you can't blame it on the other person. And that's a whole nother discussion there.
That's good. That's good. And we're going to make a turn here at the top of the hour. I'm going to open. Well, I just put the phone number up. And if you all have any questions for Pastor Evans or for myself or for Dr. Dwyer, you're welcome to call in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to ask Dwyer and Evans this particular question, because Evans, you know, when I was going through therapy, I was talking to you to make sure she was doing it right. Every time I go have a therapist session, I call him to make sure she was doing it right until I finally figured it out. But one thing, and you notice this was a breakthrough for me, was when she taught me how to recognize an emotion. Because for the longest, Dwight, every time we get on our conversation, she would say something like, "Well, tell me about your day." "I ain't do nothing." "What was your win today?" "I ain't have none. Just a regular day." And it was just, and that was still me program not wanting to talk, but I didn't realize I was bottling up emotions. So one day she called me, we had our session, and I was excited to tell her after this. She said, "What did you do today? What was your win? Or what was your win this week?" I said, "You know what my win was?" She said, "What?" "I washed and folded the clothes and put them away in one sitting." She said, "Good job." Because what she was trying to get me to do was recognize an emotion. Every emotion, negative or positive, needs a body. And you can ignore that emotion all you want to. You can ignore it all you want to. Even if it's negative, it's going to take that body and it's going to do whatever it does. But if you can recognize it soon enough, now you can make a decision on what to do with that emotion. I think, Dr. Dwyer, that's a problem with a lot of us, that especially don't because they got this new buzzword, emotional intelligence, right? And if people don't have that emotional intelligence, that buzzword they got out here, then they don't recognize emotion. Talk about that for a moment.
I'm leery, if you will, because do understand emotional intelligence. Taught emotional intelligence for a while.
I don't understand it. I'm trying to learn.
Taught emotional intelligence for a while. And then I think, and I'm going to go back to something that was said previously. I think within the grand scheme of understanding some things, other things open up and it reveals other things. So that said, the more you learn, the more that you know, the more you realize that you don't know, right? So as long as we keep and maintain that humble approach, then we don't get too high on ourselves about the one thing that we think that we're experts in. And so when I listen to a lot of people talk about emotional intelligence, they're really not talking about emotional intelligence. In some ways, in some fashions, they're talking about emotions, but it's not necessarily intelligence per se. It's not necessarily progressive in the way of it. It's just kind of like how you want me to talk about this particular thing. I'll give you a perfect example. You ask me how my day was at work, it is fine. Because at the end of the day, that's how I view a job. A job serves its purpose. It's not something I want to lean into and talk a great deal about. So at the end of the day, do I have the ability to talk about the things that I want to talk about? Do I want to talk about those things? Right. So there has to become a level of awareness, right, when it comes down to emotional intelligence. First and foremost, part of it, if we're in relationship, it's not about what you want me to talk about, right? Why don't you ask me what I want to talk about and allow me to share that with you? And so we go from, and I say it this way, we like to talk emotional intelligence from the standpoint of emotionally ignorant and end up emotionally manipulating people. But what is emotional intelligence overall when it comes to us? Well, emotional intelligence is found under spiritual intelligence, because now it's a way of me understanding what it is I'm feeling in real time, actually taking the time to qualify what it is that I'm feeling, which means that I may have to do some level of introspection so I can ask myself what it is I'm feeling and why it is that I'm feeling this particular way. And then what is the necessary change that I need to make as it regards to this, and then do the thing that the new change is telling me to do, all while being emotionally regulated, which means I don't get too high and I don't get too low. So now when it comes down to emotional intelligence, we being in the space of relationship, it's not about what I want you to do, right? It's not about what you want me to do. It's how we recognize that the other person should be esteemed higher than ourselves. Therefore, we talk to them in that regard, not trying to make the other person feel like I am more emotionally savvy than they are.
Yeah.
That's good. Follow up with that, Evans. Then we're going to go to this last segment. Go ahead.
The key, as the brother has already said, would be to use the biblical principles that we know are true and just being able to apply them would save so much energy and time if we did esteem others, if we did respect more, if we gave more. You can always, you always want to, some people, they always want to receive, but they never want to give. And I think when a person is a giver, at some point in time, you do want to receive. That growth be left up to that individual and not you. So your role has to be, what should I do? And it goes back to the biblical principle. I still have to do what is right, what is best. And when we keep that frame of mind, I think you find balance with each other if you have the same intention, if you have the foundation. Now, when the foundation is different, it causes it to be more difficult. But if you have two people who have the same foundation and they apply the same principles at the same time, that is incredible in and of itself. We find forgiveness there. We find long suffering there. We find patience there. And one thing I learned late is to treat my wife like I would treat a sister in Christ.
Wow.
Meaning to love you unconditionally, regardless. And it takes so much of you putting yourself out of the way. Oh, I deserve this. And just do it. And then trust God in the process. But you have to have the same foundation. And if the foundation is not the same, you can't apply the same principles.
Yeah. This has been a rich conversation, and it's going to get richer. Listen, y'all give me a sec. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to bring LaRue. LaRue is my podcast assistant. It's my AI podcast assistant, y'all. She got a little message for us. I'm going to let her give that. And then we're going to come back. We're going to discuss what she said. I'm going to open up the phone lines if you all have any questions. And we will go from there. So y'all give me like 2 minutes to take this break. I'm going to take my guys out, and then we'll be right back, okay? Give me one out, 2 out.
Intellectual stew. Oh, we're cooking something true. Intellectual stew. Real raw and relevant for you. With James Kirkland guiding through the deep, the light, the old, the new. Intellectual stew.